Hi, I'm Dean Rojas, and this is the day after the big tournament win here in Alabama, and I'm going to take you out on the water and show you exactly how I did it. Different conditions than we had yesterday on Sunday. A lot of clouds, a lot of wind. Today, bright skies, fog, hazy, and cooler temperatures. It's probably about 10 degrees cooler than it was yesterday, and usually when there's a shad spawn like that, bright skies means they're only going to do it for a little while. They're not going to, be up there like they were yesterday for like 2.5 hours. So let's go check it out. Let's go see where they're at and see what the conditions are calling for. So one of the key baits this week for me was a swim jig. Now the key with the swim jig is being in and around to throw it in around the shallow grass, buckbrush. Any kind of shoreline cover was key for me because the shad were up on the bank. And basically just throwing about a 3/8 half-ounce jig with a suicide shad, big bite trailer on the back, made it a nice slim profile where it can weave in and around the cover and so forth. 16-pound Sunline FC Sniper, a 7.3 Micro Magic Ducket fishing rod, 6.3 gear ratio on my 360R Ducket reel. And the key was just trying to get it as close to the cover as I possibly could and swim it through there. Now there was a few times where I would catch them out into open water, but when you see a lot of open water here, when you look on my Lowrance graph, you can see the grass is actually starting to grow. So there was a column of about 12 to 14 inches of grass that's coming up from the bottom. And the swim jig, you can feel it just going through that stuff, and the fish were coming up and grabbing it, especially when there was a shad spawn. They were very active and want to feed. So another key bait for me this week was a square bill crankbait. Now this is just a generic type bait that's kind of a dull color. It doesn't have a lot of brightness to it. But really, when the shad are spawning, all you want to do is get a reaction strike. You want them to just, they see it come running by and they want to grab it, and that's exactly what you want. The water clarity was probably, you could see down to maybe a foot, if that. You can use more of it seemed like the natural colors were better. They didn't want anything that was bright. So the cool thing about when you're fishing a spot like this, when you have fish up there feeding, is to have multiple baits and multiple styles of retrieves, actions, all that stuff, trying to give the fish something different to look at. And that was key for me all week long, and especially yesterday, because I used 5 different baits in one area to catch all that weight in the first period. Again, I'm using a 16-pound FC Sniper Sunline fishing line, a 7.3 Micro Magic Pro Ducket rod, and this one was a slower gear ratio, 5.3 on the square bill as opposed to 6.3 on the swim jig, and everything else I was throwing. Still, a 360R reel, and just trying to work and be erratic with the action, and trying to draw the strike into where they're sitting there and they watch this thing come by, and you'll watch the pumping motion that I make as a stop and go. It's running and it stops, and those fish can't stand it, especially when it's running and it stops right in front of their face. They got to ground up and grab it. So a lot of reaction strikes. I had fresh Gamakatsu treble hooks on there. I had to swap them out during the first period because I caught so many fish on it. They were wearing out. I mean, they were just getting dull. And so I lost a couple fish because of that. So I put fresh gummies back on again, started landing them again. So it's important to keep those hooks sharp. There's one, another one. It's a good one there. A long one there. And we went through the swim jig, we went through the square bill, and sometimes you just got to fish a little bit slower, and that's where I pulled out the little Hydro Pop. Now this is made by Spro. It's been discontinued, so there's still a few of them out there floating out there, but this bait here I won Toledo Bend on, ironically 8 years ago, my last win. So, and I brought it out here for this tournament as well and caught a couple fish on it that helped me out tremendously. So when things start to slow down in an area and they've stopped feeding, they've stopped chasing shad, they've stopped moving, sometimes they want something just a little bit slower motion in the water. Some of those largemouth, and especially the big ones, they're just wandering around looking for any injured fish that could be on the surface or just swimming by an easy meal, and that's where the popper comes in. Throwing it on a black ice 7.2 medium action rod, 6.3 gear ratio. But the key thing is I'm throwing monofilament. You want to throw monofilament on all your topwater baits because monofilament floats. Fluorocarbon sinks. Fluorocarbon will detract the action from your bait if you continue to throw it on topwater bait, because the line sinks and it won't work properly. So I'm using Sunline Defire is the name of the brand of the line. It's a nice copolymer monofilament fishing line, and it casts a mile super smooth with a 360R 6.3 gear ratio on that, and something that you can cast a long way. Got lots of good action. So I saved the best for last. Everybody knows I love to throw frogs. So this week was the spit shad was the deal this week, especially when the fish were chasing the shad up and around the cover. On the first day of competition, I caught 3 of my biggest bass on that dude right there, skipping it up into the willows, into the buckbrush, as the fish were chasing shad up in and around the cover. This one got the big bites. I wasn't catching any spotted bass on it. It was all largemouth. Fast forward to yesterday, it was the same type of deal, but I was fishing a little bit different. I was fishing hay grass. That's the cool thing about the Spro spit shad, is you can work it in any kind of cover. You can work it in open water. You can fish it around cover. It skips like a dream, and it's weedless. You're not gonna get hung up. So you can throw it anywhere you want. So yesterday, it was a key bait for me. I caught some key fish on it yesterday to close the wind out here on Smith Lake. I love it. I mean, I love throwing hollow belly frogs, and this particular one here we created about 4 years ago, and it's becoming one of my favorites. I throw it a lot more now than I did the bronzeye, just because it has a lot more action in the sense of it has popping, spitting, walking, chugging. I can do all sorts of different things with it, and it's just an awesome bait. As you can see how chewed up the bait is. I'm using 80-pound Sunline FX2 braid. I know that sounds like a lot, but if you look at it, it's actually just like 65-pound regular braid, but it breaks at 80-pound test line, which is really good. You won't have any failure with that. And I'm using my Dean Rojas Signature Series frogging rod from Duckett Fishing. You know, we sell a ton of these things because the action is great. You can throw a buzz bait on it, you can throw a spinner bait on it, chatterbait, whatever you want, but it's designed to throw a frog. And so it's a 7.0 medium heavy action, and then with a 360R 7-to-1 gear ratio, high speed. Okay, we're not 6.3, we're not 5.3, we are 7-to-1 gear ratio, because when you get that bite, you want to be able to set the hook and drive and crank as fast as you can.
That was awesome. You got that strike. I'm sure you did.
Look at that deal, huh?
On the frog. Spit shad, baby. Look at that sucker, huh? Yeah.
Coming back out here on the water the day after I won this beautiful MLF trophy, stage 5 here in Coleman, Alabama. A lot of different conditions. You know, yesterday we had a lot of overcast, some wind, low light conditions. Today, the complete opposite. Bright sun, fog, and about 10 to 15 degrees cooler. So I'm glad that we fished it yesterday and not today, because I don't know if I would have caught as many as I did yesterday. So with that being said, what a wonderful week here in Coleman, Alabama. Wrapping up my first win in about 8 years. So for me, it was so sweet, and all the great things that come with that. All my fans, all my great sponsors, and the great organization of Major League Fishing. Sitting here Monday morning reminiscing about all the great things that happened yesterday makes it that much sweeter.
Yeah! Woo! Yes! 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 Finally, I get that big red trophy about that high, man. I'm just so excited.